listening to C-Suite Unplugged, a podcast by the Business Council of Alberta, where the province's top executives share their career story, what's happening at their companies, and speak candidly about the most pressing business issues. I'm your host, Adam Legge, and in each episode, I sit down with Alberta's leading CEOs, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders to explore their path to the top and what they're focused on right now. In this episode of C-Suite Unplugged, I'm joined by Trevor Haynes, co-founder, president, and CEO of Black Diamond Group. Since starting the company in 2003, Trevor has led Black Diamond's growth from a Calgary-based startup into one of North America's leading providers of modular space and workforce accommodation solutions. He's branched out developing a software platform called LodgeLink, which you'll hear about, and Trevor's passionate entrepreneur and has been a tremendous supporter of the Business Council of Alberta, having co-chaired our energy services sector table that was developed during the pandemic at the request of Premier Jason Kenney. In our conversation, he reflects on the experiences that have shaped his leadership, as well as what it takes to build and sustain a company. Enjoy the show. Trevor, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Adam. Pleasure to be here.
Well, that's great. I'm looking forward to this conversation. You and I have known each other for many, many years. So let's start with your journey. What was your early life like, childhood, and how did that shape you? And what was the first job that got you a paycheck?
Well, that goes back a ways. And contrary to popular belief, I wasn't actually born in a trailer. I just spent my time renting trailers. Yeah, moved around a lot when I was young. My dad was pursuing a career that caused us to move about 8 times in 13 years. And so early life had us back and forth across Canada, and a bit of an unconventional upbringing from that perspective. Mm-hmm. I think that which has given me an ability to fit in, and also the ability to be a bit independent and be comfortable with that. And then a little bit later on, like many families, our family broke apart in a very difficult time with the national energy program, and we went through a number of very difficult years, which I think informed a sense of, needing to work and generate my own funds to pay for hockey. And, as I got a little bit older, if I wanted to have a beer, I had to make my own money. So first paycheck came out of the restaurant businesses. I think I had to act like I was 14 so I could get a job when I was only 13, and worked at a local restaurant called the Coffee Pot in the Lake Bonavista shopping mall. And then graduated to other restaurants on McLeod Trail in Calgary, including places like Chi-Chi's and Jerry Houston's and Smugglers, which is still around.
Institution, yep.
Sort of making money to put gas in the car I share with my sister, and, pay for hockey and anything else I wanted to do.
I'm sorry you had the difficult family situation like many did in the 80s with the NEP. And as the silver lining sounds like it made you a self-starter, independent, and hardworking entrepreneur that you are today. So.
Yeah, I think probably won't be rated as the smartest guy in any room, but I might give good run for the hardest working. And I think that goes back to very early days of learning the importance of working and the independence of earning your own dollars when you have to. I think somewhere along there, sort of the whole idea of business, a little bit from my dad early years, when in those days executives would be in town, they'd be over at the house, and as a young kid listening to my dad and his colleagues talking, business sort of struck me, or maybe a seed was planted. Perhaps if they were in ranching or firefighting, that's what seed would have been planted with me as well. So I think from an early on, I was kind of intrigued by the idea of business, important, et cetera. And then later on, a sense of independence, just, money is a type of optionality and a freedom. And I think I sort of gravitated in that way and did lots of things. And high school had landscaping companies, and we had a little company that we would clean the windows of bars on McLeod Trail in the old days where people smoked in bars, and we would scrape the yellow nicotine off residue off of the windows, et cetera. And just all these different ways of making a little bit of extra money, and began the idea of one day building business. And always interested in business. So those were the early days and the early paychecks, which weren't very big, but
they never are. But they're a platform for something great in the future. So, speaking of kind of the early days, people love the journey story. What's the journey of Trevor Haynes finishing high school, diploma in hand, whole world in front of him? Where did you go from there to where you are today as president and CEO of Black Diamond Group?
Yeah, like most people, it wasn't a direct line by any means. Wasn't entirely sure how to get going. Took me a while to find my place. Went to University of Toronto after graduating from Dr. EP High School in Southwest Calgary, for all the Lancers out there. Went to U of T. Had an idea of going into law, even though there was nobody in our family in law. I think I might have been the first in our families to get a university degree. So it wasn't really a template I was following.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned earlier, always short of funds. So I worked during university, and ironically, I worked on install crews, putting portable buildings in place on sort of Fridays, managed to not have classes on a Friday like many people do.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than going to the pub on campus, I went to work most weekends, and made money in what ended up being the industry that I've spent my career in. After university, I was interested in a number of things, certainly finance, public markets, business generally, but again, didn't really have a pathway. So tried a few different things, gravitated back to Alberta and, to talk about moving around a lot as a kid. Ground zero, both my parents' families, long time Alberta sort of grassroots, a lot of homesteading in the late 1800s, et cetera. So everything always connects back to Alberta. Mm-hmm. After university, I came back to Alberta, and I was able to start my career with General Motors in their finance group as part of GMAC. Interestingly, I'd done my senior essay at University of Toronto as a comparison of General Motors and Ford Motors between the years of 1919 and 1929. Sounds a bit arcane, but this is the period where General Motors, with Alfred Sloan's new corporate model with committees and general managers, et cetera, overtook the autocratic Ford. I was quite enamored with General Motors. Was excited to go for work for them. So I spent my time at a territory in southern Alberta, southern BC, and audited car dealerships. At night, they would have us go and repossess cars.
Oh, geez.
So that was my first job. I think I was looking at this the other day. $17,000 a year was starting salary, which even then, it sounds like very little today, but even then wasn't very much. So that's where I got my first start. The patina of General Motors wore off very quickly. It was a very difficult work environment. I remember thinking at 22, 23 years old, if this is what work is like, I don't know if I can make it the next 40 years. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many young people feel. Hopefully nobody who works in my businesses feels that way, but just felt a gloom on Sunday nights, having to go in on Monday, and couldn't wait for Friday. And, a full career just seemed like an entirety I couldn't make my way through. So despite some success there, a couple of promotions, I ultimately decided I just wasn't happy. Wrote my securities exams and became a broker in Levesque Beaubien was the brokerage firm, now part of National Bank Financial. And worked away there. I've always loved markets. Even today, I just the whole concept of capital markets is a lifelong passion. And I worked there, didn't entirely love it. It was a very, at that time, it was aligned around the commission the broker was making, gave you your stack rankings internally. It didn't really matter much about your customer, et cetera. And I don't know, just didn't seem to have the team environment or the elements of finance that I had anticipated. So there again, I moved on. And I say this to young people today. I mean, you just need to find your place, and don't be afraid to make a few changes. Don't know if I would have listened to that advice. I was just sort of trying to find a place. I ended up over at ACO to help out on a project, and I just loved it. Loved the people, loved the business. Wanted to go back to law school, gave up on that idea, stayed for 10 years, done essentially every role in the business. Was treated well, great business, and had a fantastic experience there. And that's where the depth of what I use today, go deep and then go broad. That was sort of the foundational piece for me through that period of time. Just found an industry and people that just resonated with me. And that was sort of the early stages. So that takes you they were very quickly through those early years up to the point where I started thinking about doing something on my own.
Great. We'll touch on the Black Diamond beginnings in a minute, but along your journey, were there any pivotal figures, mentors, advisors that really helped shape your leadership journey and or philosophy?
For sure. I'm a very avid reader. I like biographies, etc. So there's lots of people, I sort of emulate, but you never meet, as I'm sure is the case for you.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of directly, there were some people who were just really good to me along the way. Colleagues that I worked with within ATCO, just a true pioneer, visionary in Ron Southern. I never worked that closely with him, but certainly had the opportunity to be part of something that was just really impressive in terms of what was built, ATCO and everything around ATCO. Sort of the behavior and how you treat people to just how you expect more from yourself than everybody else and how that resonates in a team environment. So I'd say from there, and then a good friend of mine, her father, Bob Braun, who I'm sure you've
I know Bob. Yep.
Profiled, just a true entrepreneur and just somebody who loves everything about business. Really good family, good values, good community values. He and Carol, his wife, always had an interest in their kids' friends, and Bob was really good for me, good to me. Lots of advice, invested in all my early schemes and businesses. They always worked out for him, and just sort of that sounding board. And many other people who helped me along the way. To the extent I've had any success at all, it certainly isn't all of my own making. Lots of people around me and family. The colleagues that I work with, the people who joined me in the early days and we took risks together. We've had a great run, but I am immensely appreciative of sort of their confidence in me and sort of working through problems over the years. It makes a difference. It's all about people.
Yeah. Yeah. I know Bob from back in the chamber days when I was running there, and he was very heavily involved with the chamber and very helpful, very strong advisor for me. And yeah, tremendous things to say about Bob Braun. Yeah, it's
just a different way of looking at things. Such an optimist. Be grinding through a problem, and he'd say, Trevor, why don't you go bigger? Why don't you go faster? Oh my God, Bob, we're going 100 miles an hour here. Oh yeah, but we could do more. And it would put things into context. You're like, yeah, maybe this acquisition isn't that big after all. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Trevor, what does a day in the life of you as CEO look like? You've got such a diverse company. What does a day in your life look like? Are there any habits, rituals, sort of standard things in your schedule that you do?
We've got a system of annual processes, quarterly processes, sort of the run the business methodologies, which are very important to us and I think have contributed to our success. If you run a really good system, we all know where each other are on the field, and that's when the true talent can show up. We've got a good system. Part of my day and my week is sort of working that process. Part of it is also related to current issues or opportunities. We spend a lot of time and M&A, a lot of our opportunities business-wise are project-related, and so there's a lot of strategy. There's a lot of complexity to when you're deploying sort of large facilities into the middle of nowhere, whether it's Australia or Nevada or Northern Canada. I still love that work. I enjoy spending time with our teams and thinking and strategizing, so I love doing that. I try to be present, to engage. We're quite spread out now. I think we have 27 offices. I think it's important for leaders to be visible, present. And so I move around, try to interact on a personal basis with our teams. We're a very humble industrial services business. I don't move around with an entourage. I just move around, visit with the team, and I find it energizing, educational, reminds me why I do this. I love the people, and I love our business, the problem solving, et cetera. And then, of course, spending time with customers, vendors, to the extent I'm involved in sort of the public aspects of business and conferences, et cetera, a certain amount of time there. So I mentioned I learned how to work early in life. I still put in arguably long days and long weeks, but I do enjoy just enjoy everything about business.
That's awesome.
I don't know how else to put it.
Nope, that is awesome. I mean, that's what we did. We need good, strong entrepreneurs who love nothing more than to grow and build and invest in their businesses and their people, right? So,
in the creative process, a lot of people, they'll turn their head when I say I find business highly creative, and I think what I bring to the table as an entrepreneur is that willingness to create, build new businesses, try new things. We try not to copy what others are doing. Find a problem and figure out a new way of solving it. And I find that the most exciting part of what I do, and probably where I've added value to Black Diamond, the businesses I've been involved in. Our latest business that we're building from scratch over the last few years, LodgeLink, is immensely rewarding, going through the early stages of creating a business and an organization, carving out market share, all those type of things. So it's just immensely satisfying.
That's awesome. Well, let's make the segue into Black Diamond itself, Trevor. So, give us an overview of the company, what it does and who you serve and where you operate.
The best way to describe the business, it's based primarily on modular buildings. There's a number of different applications of modular technology or structures, and gradually we're covering all of those. Two principal business units. We have our remote accommodation. This is where we're putting in place large housing facilities where our customer needs to bring trades, labor to an area that lacks infrastructure. So we'll put in a camp for however many people. You may be building a mine. Maybe you're a uranium producer and you're going into Uranium City, similar to how some of our customers are doing right now. Somewhat in the middle of nowhere, you need to figure out how you're going to house a couple thousand trades who are going to come and build a new mine for you. You would call us. We've got the knowledge in terms of everything from logistics to building codes and union standards, et cetera, and we can solve that problem for you and then actually execute, move it out. All that kit out, set it up, operate it, house and look after your workforce. And when you're done, you can take it all apart and move it somewhere else. So that's one aspect. The other is modular for every other purpose. We operate under the brand Box Modular. Probably see us around. We're the largest player in British Columbia, places like Vancouver. Got over 1,000 buildings in the Greater Toronto area, Houston, Dallas, Georgia, or Atlanta, Georgia, et cetera. Got about just under 13,000 buildings in our space rentals. And these are buildings that do anything from portable classrooms for the Ontario school boards or independent school districts throughout the eastern seaboard of the U.S. to large project offices, multi-sectional modular for building. We're deploying a lot of data centers in the U.S. right now, as an example. And then your very simple construction site, wheeled office trailers, et cetera. And then everything that goes around it. I think we may be the largest furniture rental business in Canada because our customers also need furniture. So
yes, that's true.
That's the basis. That's the basis of what Black Diamond is. And we've been building for the better part of 20 years, the platform in multiple different geographies. It's about as fast as I can explain Black Diamond to you.
Oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's awesome. And so let's talk about you. You kind of got us up to the point where you were at ATCO in your previous conversation, and so let's get to the point where you start Black Diamond. So I think it's 2003. You and a small team of entrepreneurs with just 12 modular units laid the foundations for Black Diamond. So maybe walk us through those early days and what was the spark for the idea behind Black Diamond, and how did you grow it from there?
Yeah, it was a bit more serendipitous than it sounds. We didn't leave ATCO and start Black Diamond. In fact, I had an opportunity, connects back with Bob Braun. He called me down to his office and said, Trevor, you need to leave ATCO and get out on your own. And here's an opportunity. Another friend, we bought his father's concrete company in Calgary. It's not as far-fetched as you think. I mean, construction, project management, et cetera, is transferable, but I didn't really understand the concrete business. Anyways, not an easy decision. Thought long and hard about. I was very successful, and I believe I would have continued to have a successful career had I stayed. But I always had this desire to do it on my own and build a business and be entrepreneurial. I just think it was innate and probably inevitable. Didn't seem that way at the time. It was a hard decision, and we fortunately, my wife Tori and I, more or less paid our house off In my mid-30s, I decided with 2 young kids to mortgage up the house and buy half a concrete business with a sizable note owing to the previous owner. So I think we started with like 35 employees, and within 2 or 3 years, we had about 350 employees. So cast in place concrete. We started a residential business, CF Construction, which is still, I think, one of the largest residential home building concrete companies in Calgary. And we ended up doing high-rise condo development, real estate syndication, all kinds. It was just a business at 1,000 miles an hour. Instead of bringing ideas to, a panel of older, experienced people, we're like, well, seems like a good idea. Why don't we just do it? It was a crazy, crazy period of time, but learned a lot, especially working capital. When you're in a big company, you don't understand that when you have to make payroll for 350 people every 2 weeks and your customer is slow paying you, that's working capital.
That's working capital, exactly.
A lack of working capital equals stress. I think we spent an enormous amount of time. I had a very friendly banker at Scotiabank, so thanks again to Scotia. Jerry Snell, I think he's long retired now, but he was very good with us young guys. He obviously liked us in our entrepreneurial spirit. Anyways, we got through it partway along, and here's, to the extent we have time for a little story, but I left Atco well. They had a customer golf tournament every year up in Banff, and my team that were still there had called, and as often the case, they had a last minute cancellation. I am a terrible golfer, absolute terrible golfer. I said, well, Trevor, could you just do us a favor? You got to come on Friday. Like, I have so many things going on. And I'm a terrible golfer. I can't come, guys. And they kept calling. I'm like, okay, fine. Well, if you put me in a golf cart with somebody I know and is also not a very good golfer, and we can just relax and have a good time. So they did. They put me with Derek Lowe, who had been a customer of mine. He was originally Command Drilling, then Neighbors Drilling. And through the course, we had a lot of fun. Along the way, we were complaining. He was complaining about working for a U.S. service company. After selling his drilling company, I was complaining about being in the construction business, 10% holdbacks with 12% margins, and trying to make payroll every 2 weeks. We more or less said, well, the best business ever was the camp rental business. As luck would have it, there was an ATCO salesperson right there willing to sell us a couple of drill camps. And so, in the spur of the moment, we signed up and ordered 2 drill camps. And for good measure, 2 well sites. I think what we had said to the individual, Glenn Clark was his name, the sales guy from ATCO, we were like, well, if you can find somebody to rent them, we'll buy them. And he came back because all their customers were there. And like, okay, here's, I think it was Traverse Food Service. They'll contract the drill camps, and Anderson Exploration, the well site. So we agreed. I called Derek the next day. I said, we bought $1 million worth of equipment yesterday. Like, where's your half? And so that's where we brought in a couple of other partners. Derek's old drilling partner, Rob Wagemaker, is still on our board. My brother-in-law, Steve Stein, joined. And anyways, we pooled the dollars together. I think ATB helped us out by lending 60% against those assets. And we had no employees. This was just another venture. And that was fall of 2003. And we went through the winter drilling season, collected our rent, met in the spring for breakfast. Humpty's restaurant on McLeod Trail South, not there. Like 6:30 in the morning, because a couple of guys were farming. So, well, here's the cash we have to divvy up. And so, well, what should we do? Should we buy some more equipment? And I said, well, I know this business well. I think I could build a business out of this. They said, yeah, why don't you? And they passed the cash back into the pot. Started buying more equipment, started hiring people who had been on my team for years in the industry, and took us a while to find a name. A lot of people ask about the name. I'm not a skier. I am a skier, but I didn't name it after skiing or after cheese for that matter. All our great names were already taken. We have family properties out by Black Diamond, Alberta. So we named it. The company is named after Black Diamond, Alberta, which isn't even called Black Diamond, Alberta anymore.
A Diamond Valley now. Gonna have to change the company, right? Yeah.
And so that's like just really grassroots. It wasn't an elegant business plan that we went out and found financing for. And then it just took off. I mean, We knew the industry well, and our timing worked out. Shallow gas drilling was in its boom, for 2004 to 2007, if you remember that period. And then with the oil sands coming on and the massive camps required for the build out of the oil sands, our timing was good. It's capital intensive, building up the asset base, and we sort of outstripped our ability to mortgage our houses, and aunts and uncles and everybody else putting money in. And then we decided to go public as an income trust. I think we were the last business trust out, September 26, 2006. That's where we went public. We just needed access to capital to grow. And we had a 44% CAGR for about 8 years straight.
Wow.
Well, that original $1 million went to an enterprise value of about somewhere around 1.3 billion in that time period.
Wow, Trevor, that's amazing.
Yeah, those are busy days.
Those were busy days, indeed. Busy making money.
That's the story, or at least that's my story. My part in Black Diamond, there were a number of people who came together, very talented, and joined early on or along the way. Those people have made all the difference over top of the little bit I brought to it.
Yeah, what a great success story, Trevor. Embedded is sort of a sense of adventure and some risk tolerance and willing to roll some dice. So you have more intestinal fortitude than I do, for sure, I think, on some of those.
Well, maybe we just didn't know better.
That is another option for sure. Exactly. I love the description of Black Diamond's lodging accommodation division, hospitality in the most inhospitable environments. What are some of the most extreme and remote locations that you guys operate in?
Within Black Diamond, I mean, we've covered most of the typical resource and remote infrastructure areas in Canada and the Canadian North. We've got a pretty good practice in Australia as well. We acquired our first business there in 2013. So, we're way up in northwestern Australia, where the dirt is red and the wind feels like a blow dryer in your face. We sort of cover a lot of ground. I would say in my time when I worked internationally, we put camps on top of the glaciers on Greenland for National Science Administration of the U.S. To take their ice coring. We followed columns of the U.S. military into Bosnia in those times. We were in all parts of North Africa and Middle East and pretty much every corner of the planet, a lot of it not overly hospitable. I like to say I've done business in this industry in 58 countries, 8 of which I would do business in again. Yeah, what we do is applicable to where there's a lack of infrastructure or there's inhospitable places where people aren't going to settle and live for long periods of time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How have you diversified the business, Trevor, beyond the traditional workforce housing? You alluded to some school facilities. What innovations have you introduced, I would say, to the accommodations business over time? And maybe if you want to touch on LodgeLink there as well, that would be a great opportunity.
Yeah, I talked about the early years, which were go-go years for us. A ton of work and good work was done by the team. But the other side of that was a really difficult period of time. We weren't over-levered. We always managed the business somewhere around 1-to-1 debt to EBITDA. But when the oil prices fell, within 18 months, we lost about 90% of our EBITDA. I think we were about 140 million in 2014-15. And then it was a lot of work. As hard as it is to bring a team together, it's so painful when you just don't have enough work for all of them. And so we went through a really difficult period of time. And I will be, to the end of my days, grateful for those who stuck with me on my team, as well as those who continue to support us in the investment communities and even within the business or in the city, other business leaders. But through that period of time, we really had to think about what do we have to offer? How do we work our way out of this and grow? Fortunately for us, I mean, the application of modular goes well beyond remote accommodation and certainly well beyond oil and gas. We just happened to be, because of the situation, we grew very quickly there. So we got to work building up our space rentals business. We had already assembled some companies in Ontario all the way back to 2005. So we had a footprint there. And the cash flow we were generating, we were putting into building out our space rentals fleet. And then we made the acquisition of a company called Brickco on the West Coast, sort of the biggest player in general modular. And we really had to stretch to do it. We had to do a financing, redo our bank lines, sell multiple pieces of real estate, and do it all in one day.
Oh, wow.
We were competing against other buyers. Anyways, when we were worried we overpaid, but it proved to be pivotal. Such a great business, and the team there stayed with us. That was our pivot. We were able to switch to asset-based lending and then accelerate organically and inorganically, just building out that space rentals platform. The US, Eastern Canada, elements of Australia were doing well in that period. So that was the primary piece. We did expand into the school business with the purchase of a company called Vanguard down based out of Pennsylvania. The only reason we were able to buy this one, it was a process, and everybody submitted their bids. We were not the top bid, but as COVID onset, everybody started dropping away, and they called us and they said, "Would you still honor your bid?" And we're like, "Well, how are we going to do due diligence in 30 states in the middle of COVID?" But we decided it was the only way we were going to have the opportunity to buy this great piece, and so we did it. It was not easy, but we inspected almost 2,000 or 2,500 individual buildings over 30 states in the middle of COVID.
Oh, geez.
And it's just a fantastic business, amazing people, great asset. And so that's how we pivoted and started building our way out of that difficult period of time. And along the way, we also looked at a lot of our customers have been asking us if we could help them with the full travel cycle. So you think about housing people in these remote areas using our facilities, but then think about the complexity of moving hundreds or thousands of people in and out continuously from all over the place, and the inefficiencies that our customers were struggling with. And so we started playing around with that. It seems odd in the middle of a difficult period of time to think of a new business. But out of that and a pilot project that we did, we created our third business unit, which is LodgeLink. And this is where we're using software that sits over top of the global distribution system for booking hotel rooms and airplane seats, et cetera, and allows you to manage your large crew as sort of one group. And then our software breaks that down and populates all of the bookings, tracks multiple layers of cost tracking, and also allows you to edit every single room repeatedly and do things like match cross shifts up against the same hotel room, or if you're working day-night shift like our frac customers do. Just the complexity of how this has to translate into the traditional travel systems of, the Sabres of the world and property management systems. And it's proven out to be a really compelling, it's growing really quickly. It's very technology oriented, which is kind of new for me. So I'm learning. The addressable market is absolutely massive. We think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $60 billion a year that North American companies spend on moving workforce, not their executives and their salespeople or conventions. These are companies that have to move their workers to where the work is done and then bring them back. It's easy for us to think about knowing the oil and gas industry and how all the service companies that have to move around to service all of our great oil and gas customers. But there's a lot of industries. Railroad is our biggest industry for LodgeLink. All of the right-of-way maintenance and project. So anyways, going on a little bit too long. You can tell I'm in the middle of business building, and I think what we're doing is awesome.
Passionate about it. No, totally agree, Trevor. One other aspect that I know you're also passionate about is Indigenous partnerships and involvement with Indigenous communities. Why are those relationships important to you, and how are they making a difference both for the communities and the company?
They're pivotal. We were encouraged by a large customer in Canada many years ago to see if we could put together a partnership up in northern British Columbia with the Fort Nelson First Nation. And their thought was that because our assets sit at surface, they're a bit more tangible, and there's employment opportunity in the hospitality side, that we would be a great way of connecting in Canada's intent of providing benefit, at least in one form of benefit, into the community. And that was the beginning of learning about Indigenous communities and meeting with leadership and starting to look at how would we be a partner and how could we do this in a positive way beyond just dollars. That first partnership, they were very patient with me as a young CEO, wanting to do things different than everybody else. But it's endured 15 years in, I guess, 2008, 16 years in. Wonderful partnerships, wonderful people. It's interesting. It's not a business to business partnership. It's business to community, which means a number of things. The engagement, being present, being partners beyond just the balance sheet and the P&L. I like to think we're good partners. We have multiple really strong partnerships, and the activity in those areas and the desire to make sure there's economic benefit and employment locally is what drives it. 100% agree with aspects of resource development in Canada and infrastructure development, ensuring that there is benefit to those communities locally. And I like to think we're part of that. Mm-hmm. And there's a great deal of pride within our organization of the strength of those partnerships and the connections with the communities. Areas that we really like to support are youth and sport, youth, family, and sport. I think sport done the right way teaches a lot of values and creates pathways for building self-confidence and pathways to greater things. Mm-hmm. That's why partnering with Cheryl Bernard at the Canada Sports Hall of Fame, Warrior Sport, is big. We partner on Indigenous Youth Inspiration Day. Lots of areas where it's very positive, it's very youth-oriented, and we think it's part of how we engage and build.
I know it's something you believe heavily in, and it's an important investment in partnerships and community, and in many ways reconciliation of giving opportunity and greater control of opportunities in the individual Indigenous communities that typically haven't had a lot of chance to chart their own path.
I agree. And it's something we can connect around. Understanding each other has to do with sort of reasons to connect. And I think sport is one of those.
Yeah, totally agree. Trevor, what's next on the horizon for broadly modular solutions and workforce accommodations? You've expanded the offering to both the accommodation side and non-accommodations, but how do you see the business growing, evolving, innovating into the future?
Yeah, we just announced a transaction yesterday where we're acquiring a company called Royal Camp, great Alberta company based in Edmonton, 34 years in operating. They're a full turnkey operator. This is sort of a step out from us. We focused on assets and usually partnered with the food service providers. Royal, in my opinion, is the gold standard for quality and service. They also, like us, are really good partners from an Indigenous perspective. And so we bring in some additional great partnerships. In fact, I think they're one of the largest Indigenous employers in Canada. They have out of 580 employees, 250 are Indigenous from remote communities. And we love that. So I think for Black Diamond, expanding our service offering, I think this country is finally becoming serious about our positioning in the world from an economic and trade perspective, looking at what we have to offer. I think we're going into a development cycle. There'll be a lot of demand on companies like ours to be able to support that and to do it in a meaningful way in terms of respecting local communities and impacts on those communities, ensuring there's benefit to be had, ensuring that the people being housed are housed safely, and the duty of care is high. I think that translates resource-wise for sure, but also what we're seeing from a military defense perspective is really interesting, and we bring a lot to the table there with our broader experience globally in that area. And then something that's really interesting to us, we've been adjusting the use of our asset and our expertise for transition housing. 3 facilities in Vancouver for transition housing for homeless. Nanaimo, we're deploying currently, most recently in Kingston, Ontario, and then refining, our ability to support for disaster recovery. Obviously, we can move quickly. We can provide suitable, safe housing rapidly. And when you couple that with LodgeLink and the ability to efficiently track large groups of people as they're having to move, I think we bring a lot to the table. And then you think of LodgeLink on the broader scale. Adam, we've not run out of ideas or problems that we think we can solve. So
That's
if you think
awesome.
of companies as big problem-solving machines, I think we're well positioned. So super excited. I presume some point in time I'll start running out of energy, but at this point in time, I just absolutely love our positioning. I'm finally more aligned with where Canada is and what I think we're focused on, and I love the people I work with. So I don't know, I'm quite blessed right now in terms of doing what I love and having lots of more need to work than I maybe really want. But anyways, things are good.
So it's a pretty awesome position to have, passion for what you're doing and great energy to keep doing it, and a really interesting business model that has both the physical and the digital assets to, as you sort of put it, the sky is the limit, and where the set of future options of what you can do is still to be explored, right? So I think that's an exciting position to be in. I want to pick up on your point. You said sort of finally in agreement with where Canada's going. I mean, there's lots of big projects on people's minds and in the wish lists and major project lists and that sort of thing. I wonder if you could maybe talk about what you think about the state of the Canadian economy and the business climate right now as we're talking in 2025 here.
Yeah, I worry in some ways. I mean, there's an urgency. We need to move. I worry about some of our primary industries in central Canada, but I also worry will we be able to bring on the LNG capacity? I mean, we also participate on the U.S. side, and the discussion about a massive Alaska LNG capability isn't like we're actually tangibly engaged with the people who are working on that project. So I would tell Canadians, if you don't think there's a competition underway, there is a competition underway. We need to move. We went through a difficult time in our business, but I also felt in that same period of time I was misaligned in almost every different way. And keep in mind, I'm an entrepreneur. My view of politics comes from sort of business and practical economics rather than sort of other social perspectives. And I think there's a lot we can do, but we also have to think from a competitive perspective. This bonus depreciation in the U.S., higher inclusion on interest deductibility, even in our own system for $1 of capital for equal, opportunity to deploy in our asset base, Canada versus the U.S., there's a 15% net return advantage to that dollar going to the U.S. right now. I mean, we really have to think about these things.
Yeah.
And the best way to have fantastic social programs, I'm borrowing this from Stephen Harper, but you have a booming economy and you can have all kinds of schools and social programs and everything else. But if you don't, it's really, really difficult. We have to pay attention to our core economy and also view ourselves as competing in a broader ecosystem and not just in this microcosm. It's just Canada. But on the other side, we have so much to work with in every category when you think about intellectual resources, whether it's physical, natural resources, coastlines for export, et cetera. So from an economic perspective, there's no reason we can't continue to have one of the best lifestyles on the planet and one of the most peaceful in communities. So I'd like to think we're heading in the right direction right now, at least through a business lens, but I think we need to move more quickly, Adam.
Yeah. Trevor, if you could make 2 or 3 changes to the business climate, the investment climate in Canada to help our economy, help improve competitiveness, what would you do?
The first piece, and I think we're seeing some tangible movement here, is to underwrite the building of infrastructure or improvement of infrastructure, movement of goods, whether that's twinning the Trans-Canada, whether it's expanding our ports, et cetera, et cetera. I think that will enable business. I'm not a big fan of choosing industries and subsidizing. I think as an entrepreneur, give us a good framework and get out of the way. There's enough of us around. There's lots of private capital. We don't need to use the public balance sheet other than for some key infrastructure pieces, and let us get to work. But also where we choose to leave our capital in sort of productive investments, you shouldn't tax it. Tax it if we're going to take it out, tax it if it's going to be consumed in luxury goods, fine. But otherwise, incentivize capital remaining invested and creating economic activity and wealth creation in all its different forms, whether that's for public or private. We can debate that endlessly, but we need to compete on at a capital level. Those would be my three things. I kind of blended them together. They all kind of interconnect, again, all from an economic perspective. Other than that, I would say, in our cities, we have to figure out how we can enforce laws on safety. My team expresses to me that they feel unsafe using public transit to come to work. And we're in the middle of downtown Calgary. This seems like a problem that has to be solved. And I could go to multiple cities in Canada and certainly in the US as well, in all fairness, and hear the same concern expressed. So somehow our local community leaders, you and me included, need to get together and figure out how we do this.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because we just released a report called Municipal Matters, which is really what business leaders want to see local governments do once Albertans vote for their next local mayors and reeves and council members in late October. And crime and safety was the number one priority that business leaders expressed that Alberta community leaders need to tackle. And, it's interesting how it touched the big centers like Calgary and Edmonton, but it also was reflective of the business leaders in smaller and more rural communities who also they don't necessarily deal with some of the social disorder and the opioid crisis that we're facing in our downtowns, but they've got theft of, retail smash and grab, that kind of thing. And so I think the number one thing is, collaborative effort between federal government changing some of the bail and the catch and release process and rules to more enforcement on the street, to more wraparound services for mental health, addictions, and homelessness. But it is interesting that is how much that is a priority for business leaders. So I totally agree with you on the municipal or the community safety side, and also just the need to really think more thoughtfully about how Canada can use the capital that is invested, frankly, both corporately and personally, and incent it that it remains as investable and reinvested and redeployed, as opposed to the taxation. We just have a system that completely disincents working, investing, and that's just, to your point earlier about the US. I mean, that's our biggest competitor, and we should be looking to them to be benchmarking what we want to be looking at from an investment climate.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, our main competitor from an economic perspective is the U.S. Regardless of whether we've got trade disagreement underway, it would still be, even on a truly friendly basis, we're competing for capital between the two countries, and even state by state in the U.S. and province by province in Canada. So I think we just have to be mindful of that. I know there's some limitations in terms of what we can and can't do, but I welcome these considerations coming back into the public discourse versus having, at least my sense, having been shut out and just not in the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that's progress. These are complicated problems.
They're wicked problems, that they call them. Yeah.
I ascribe positive intent for all those who are in the middle of it and trying to work with it. We have to figure it out.
Yep, I agree. Trevor, as we close, we always like to leave on a note of optimism. So, what are you optimistic about these days? Whether it's a hockey team, a city, a province, a company, what are you optimistic about these days?
Well, I've expressed my optimism on Black Diamond and what we're seeing. I was going to suggest the Flames, but maybe I need to give a few years optimism on a rebuilding program there. But overall, I think I'm optimistic for opportunity for our youth. I truly have worried about where we're at and what opportunity looks like. And I think we're making progress. I think the future is brightening as things unfold from a national perspective. I find that encouraging, and I'm willing to help in any way I can to make sure that comes to fruition. I just very optimistic for our youth these days.
That is a great note to end on, because the youth is our future, and so let's remain optimistic about that. So, Trevor, was there anything you wanted us to ask or hoped we would ask
I think we touched on everything, Adam. I would just underscore, a deep appreciation for those who've helped me in my early years and those truly talented people who've been a part of my story throughout, and people like yourself who are representing us and trying to ensure that we've got the framework, the environment for the future. As Harley Oshkas asked me years ago, please make sure you leave things better than you found them, so that other young people like you have similar opportunity. And as I get older, I think about that comment from Harley. I think it's well put. Let's leave it better than we found it.
What a great note to end on. Well, Trevor, thanks so much for your support of the Business Council and your leadership in the business community. And thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you, Adam.
You've been listening to C-Suite Unplugged. As always, it's a privilege to spend some time with the leading executives of our membership. Thank you to our guests this month for sharing their journey and insights. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to review and share the podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time with more unfiltered leadership stories from the C-Suite.